see how. Okay. Are there any changes to the agenda? A couple of you may be expecting me to make one, but I'm going to forego that. Thank you, Tracy. And we'll see how things go anyway. I see the presence of one or two possible members of the public. And so at this time, I will ask if there's anyone not on the board or the staff who would like to make some comment. Going once, going twice, hearing none, we'll proceed to approval of the, I guess we didn't adopt the agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Who said that? For the minute taker. Was that Mike?
Did, and I'll second.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? None. Okay. Now let's move on to approval of the minutes from our June 27th meeting. Is there a motion to that effect? Lisa? Second?
Second.
Second. Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think raising a hand will sort of mitigate the obvious problem I'm having in figuring this all out. Any discussion? No changes? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes of the June 27th meeting, please say aye. I see hands raised and no one saying otherwise. Thank you. We've adopted the minutes from that meeting. And now we get to do an unusual affirmation of board action. As you all will remember, we met very briefly for a very limited non-controversial purpose in August to enable us to set the meeting time and place for the annual meeting, which has always been at the same time of day at the same place over the years. And so we all ratified that in accordance with our bylaws. But out of an excess of caution, I think we can all agree it will be smart to affirm that decision here formally. And so that being said, I ask for a motion to affirm the action of, I don't know, I don't recall, Bobby Joe, the date of the meeting. Do you?
I believe it was August 10th.
August what?
10th, I think.
10th, okay. Then a motion to approve the board's action taken remotely, I guess, at its August 10th meeting. Anyone? Tracy?
So moved.
Second? Lisa, I think? Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Raise your hand or say aye. Thank you. All opposed? Seeing none, we have affirmed that decision. Thank you very much. By the way, and I think we all get it, that what we did in August was perfectly appropriate. It was also a little bit, off to the side of normal practice, but we had to take that action, and it was literally impossible to schedule a meeting on short notice. And so we did what we did, and now we've affirmed it, which has the effect of validating it to the extent there was any confusion or concern about that. Okay. Tracy, it may be you that I should yield to for the next one, which is to approve a decision to meet remotely, with or without an in-person location. I think you raised the subject last time, so why don't I let you proceed?
Yeah, thank you. Just because we like to be very attentive to following open meeting law and dotting our I's and crossing our T's, I noted at some point that we have not been offering an in-person location for our meetings, and that law through law that came out during COVID allows us to do that. But it is the board or the body that needs to make the decision to do that. So just to be sure that we're following procedures very thoroughly, I suggested that the board consider that question and affirm that practice at least as long as we're able to, based on current law, which is through January of 23. And at that point, we can revisit our practices and deal with the circumstances as they are at that time.
Okay, so would you like to word a simple motion?
I move that the VEHI board meet remotely without an in-person location through January of 23.
Thank you. Is there a second? Peg? Is there any discussion? See,
Sorry.
Mike, go ahead.
Thanks, Joel. I had a question about whether we were subject to open meeting laws. That we're a private corporation. I was reading the bylaws versus a government entity.
We are.
We are which? Or both?
We are definitely subject to the open meeting law. We may be I don't know if we're a private entity, but we fall within the meaning of an entity subject to the law. Our membership consists entirely of public bodies, school boards, school districts. Sitting here, I don't recall the specific provision involved, but we are certain that we fall within the obligations of the open meeting law. That doesn't mean that one of us or more of us couldn't get back to you with it, or to the rest of us with the explicit provision, but.
Yeah. To the extent it's helpful, if I could add something, we did have a legal review of the provisions of open meeting law that apply to this body, and there's a summary of that somewhere in Dropbox. I can probably find that for you. Yeah. Just highlight that VEHI has this interesting mix of obligations. Not only do we need to attend to open meeting law and law that pertains to municipal bodies, but also nonprofits. So rather than having fewer things to pay attention to by virtue of our structure, we actually have more things to pay attention to.
Okay.
So,
all right, thanks. I'll look through the Dropbox and see if I can find that.
And if you drop me a little note to remind me, it won't take me long to sort it out.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. Mike being, I think, disabused of the notion that we can get away without, let me start that over. Is there any further discussion of the motion to continue to meet remotely without in-person location until at least January of 23? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. Well, there's nobody there to oppose it, so we've adopted it. Thanks very much, Tracy. Thanks for raising it last time. Now we get to an actual part of the work that we do as an organization, and I see we have 20 minutes allocated, but because we are running a bit ahead of time, if it's necessary, we may want to spend some quality time talking about the rate setting mechanism for us. The first part is item 7, which will take the lion's share of our attention regarding rates. Every year, Gio and Mike, we have to adopt a formal change in our premium rates for the ensuing fiscal year. That year begins, what, is it July? Or is it July of 23? Rather than go any further than that, I'll yield the floor. Who has the lead on this discussion?
Mark? is going to, I was actually thinking dental is first. I apologize for breaking up the
Oh.
screen. I think, Mark, we were going to take the first stab. Is that right? On the health rates or? Okay,
No,
yeah.
yeah. Now
Bobby
you're,
Jo, I thought you were going to bring some numbers up first, though. I'm not quite sure how this goes.
Yeah, we've got a lot of different things going on. So
Yeah.
let's just talk about it quickly and then we'll get into looking at visuals.
but the
So-
bottom line is we're going to face a motion to adopt a specific rate for premiums for the health plan at the end of this. So,
And
okay.
just before Bobby Jo pulls up a bunch of numbers and walks us through them, just by way of context or foundation, the rates that we're going to be discussing today and the actuarial memoranda that Blue Cross worked on with us, what it shows unequivocally is that next year's fiscal year rates are being driven almost exclusively by medical inflation, by price increases. And no,
As opposed to what?
well, there's a variety of factors, of course, that go into any rate setting. It is price inflation or unit cost. It is utilization, claims that are generated. It's mandates and fees, administrative costs. So to roll all that up and you eventually come to a number. And then you discuss that number and how, if it's high, you can bring it down. And if it's low, you clap very loudly and feel very good for it. So in this year's rate setting process, the wild card, and it wasn't actually all that wild, I suppose, when it came right down to it, were the hospital budgets. And the commercial rates that they are allowed to charge in FY23 were recently approved by the Green Mountain Care Board. And if you had the opportunity to read my quarterly report, I actually posted those numbers in the report, and they are the highest they have been in memory, recent memory, certainly. And those hospital budgets, together with price trend for pharmaceuticals in particular, and also for professional visits, what we pay when people go to a doctor, for example, an office visit, all of that rolled together brings me back to where I started. This utilization, this particular rate setting is driven almost exclusively by price setting. And that was verified by Blue Cross when we met with them on a couple different occasions. And once again, the hospital budgets are certainly the major driver of that. And remember, in addition to the rates that were recently set for FY23, we also took an increase in hospital rates, a mid-year rate increase back in April or May for the University of Vermont Health Network. So that was unexpected back in the spring. We certainly hadn't booked that into our rates going forward because we had no idea it was going to happen. And then right on that, shortly thereafter, the real big increase came through the Green Mountain Care Board. So why don't I stop there for a moment and allow Bobby Jo to sort of show you some numbers, and we can certainly come back to this issue if you'd like.
Okay. Anytime there's a question, please just raise your hand. Bobby Jo.
Okay, so when we received the renewal information from Blue Cross, it was not, like Mark said, it wasn't totally unexpected, but it still hurts a little bit. Last year, we had a really great renewal. We came in low single digits, and because of some decisions that Blue Cross had made as far surrounding the COVID pandemic, we actually asked them to add about 2.7 back into the rates because we thought that they had possibly underestimated or overestimated the reduction that they had taken for COVID. So we went out last year with about a 5%. Had we not done that, this is the rate increase we would be looking for, or looking toward, a 15.4 overall. Obviously, our biggest hit would be to the Gold CDHP, where the vast majority of the membership is. So with that said, because we did add some reserves into our into our rates last year, we're actually facing an 11.3% overall increase. Again, the bulk of it is in the gold CDHP. When we've talked about it as a management team, John, Mark, and I have talked about it. We've talked with Chris some. She just got back from vacation today, but we talked to her a couple times beforehand, and she really felt like 11.3 was the floor. I mean, we definitely did not want to go below 11.3, but probably 15.4 was probably too high. So, the management team was working within those parameters. What we learned from Blue Cross was, in order for us to maintain our current net position, which is about 17.4, 17.6, depending on what numbers you look at, we needed to add in an additional 1.7 to this 11.3 to come up to about a 13 in order to just maintain our net position level. Now, our net position is a dollar figure, and it's also a percentage. So at 13%, again, this is based on the information that Blue Cross gave us, that would keep us at our current level percentage-wise, but we would be adding some to reserves overall. So we would be adding to reserves, but as a percentage of premium, because now we're moving from $257,000 in premium to $287 million. So we went up $30 million in premium. So that means our net reserves need to kind of go up in order to go along with that. So we did a lot of modeling this past week with the help, of course, of Blue Cross. We modeled out what it would look like if we went to 12%. What would it look like if we went to 12.5? And what if we went to 13? So we have all of those numbers. And I think I'll bring up what Blue Cross sent us earlier. Hang on just one moment, let me grab that. And it shows you basically the impact to reserves based on what we decide to do with those.
Bobby Joe, you have a question, I think, from Peg.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
thanks. My memory could certainly be off. I thought our net position was supposed to be 15% or closer to that, not 17.4.
Well, that's 15 is the target.
Yeah.
There's not a limit. The only time that there's a limit is if it's materially
Below.
greater.
Okay. Was it below? There was something before we talked about if it went below a
Yes.
certain amount?
If you go below a certain amount, there's board action, there's DFR action, but for over the amount, there's really not any specific action to take unless it's materially greater. And all of us agree that 2% is not materially greater when it comes to reserves. Things can definitely swing, as we've seen the last few years, between how the hospital budgets just came in, inflation is out of control, and the market has tanked this past year. So all of those different things. So even if we had something in place that was, it's going to be difficult to put something in place that says at a certain amount, we do X, because there's so many different factors. So I think it's always going to be a discussion no matter what.
As the management folks know, I've at least raised a question behind the scenes about the implications of maintaining a net position level that is above the target in an era of proposed double-digit premium rate increases. If so, let me ask a couple of questions, I guess, of either Chris and or Bobby Joe. Am I right in that every percentage on the rate is the equivalent of about $3 million in premium payments? A little less, I guess. Is that about right? Or just we're trying to
Yeah.
get
Approximately. That was a better number before Visters left, but yeah, we're coming back up to that again at 287 million.
Right. Okay. So you get the idea. It's really $2.87 million per percentage point on the rates.
Yes.
And so every percentage point that is attached to premium is about $3 million out of the pockets of school districts and their employees. in proportion to whatever the collective bargaining arrangement is. We've talked about I've lost track of the percentage of years in VEHI's history where we've had to contend with double-digit increases like this. And they're hard to swallow because we all represent people who are paying the bills. And so the discussion that I would like at least us to entertain is the extent, if any, to which we feel comfortable in essentially lowering this. What is it, 11.3% is the proposal that you're bringing to us?
11.3 is not the proposal we're bringing to you. The management team is requesting 12.5.
12.5. All right. So whatever the starting point is, if our net position and the policy underlying it tend in a direction to come closer to 15% or even a little slop over a little bit below that, we stand to gain for the people we represent $3 million in reduced payments for every percentage point that we can legitimately say that we can lower the rate increase. I don't have a particular viewpoint about this other than that I'm very mindful of the folks we represent. And whatever the rest of the world is experiencing, even if it's far worse, and in many cases it's far worse than a 12.5% rate increase this coming year, what our folks see is the increase in their costs, in school district costs and employee costs. And to the extent that this board can make itself can end up feeling comfortable in somehow mitigating that proposal a bit more, I think we all come out ahead without jeopardizing the financial well-being of the organization, particularly in the context of its own policy, its own net position policy. So as again, as the folks I've been talking with behind the scenes know, I've asked for what our net position has been each year over actually this century, and I had access to some of it. And the most recent years, the net position that we've maintained has ranged between 14.9 and 12.6. So we're certainly within shouting distance of what our own policy tells us we ought to be at. And what we're looking at, if I understand it right, the proposal that you folks have is to maintain let me start that sentence over. And apparently we have in this past year increased our net position just by happenstance, the way the numbers work out, our expenses versus our income, a full 5% from 12. I'm looking down at a piece of paper, obviously 12.6 to 17.6%. So we haven't been above 15% in half a dozen years, and we haven't skipped a beat. I understand that we all want to be somewhat fiscally conservative, but typically when we talk about being fiscally conservative, it's from the perspective of our members and the people we represent. What can we do to make sure that we maintain the healthcare plans that they all have at a cost that they can all afford? I know what the reaction is going to be in the field, as we say, when they experience yet another double-digit increase. It doesn't make us popular, and all I want to do is make sure that we engage in, I guess, what everybody refers to as due diligence at this table where we are now, to make sure that whatever number we come up with is the best we can do for the fiscal security of the program, as well as the fiscal viability of our members, by which I mean employees and employers. Tracy.
Two questions. One, I want to be sure that the management team gets the opportunity to share all the information they wanted to share.
Of course.
And two, I wanted to ask for a little reminder of the process for rate setting. And give it myself that we make a decision on is a rate
Tracy,
to file.
I think you're coming through the way I hear you, which is there's something missing
You're
with the.
breaking up a little bit, Tracy, from
You're
time to
breaking up. Forgive me, I don't do this every day. You're breaking up. That's the term.
Is that better? I'm turning off my video, hoping
Yeah, that's better.
audio
That's
will-
better.
Okay, super. Sorry
I
about
think
that.
that's a terrible thing to say to Tracy, but go ahead.
I just wanted to remind folks that we are making a decision about a rate to file and not the final decision about what our rates are. And DFR typically weighs in and occasionally gives us pushback based on things like what we have in our reserves. So I just wanted to be sure, especially for newer folks on the board, that's understood, and also for guests who happen to be in attendance, that the decisions that we make today aren't final, that there's some back and forth that happens after this point. And beyond that, I just want to be sure that we have all the information that the team wants us to have.
One more introductory point, then I'll yield. When I looked at the net position policy, which is a strange name for a policy, but it's one we were required by the state to adopt a few years ago. The range within which it considers, and this policy I think was approved by the state, the range within which we're supposed to operate is having a target of 15% reserves, which is on the order of $50 million. And we are required as a board to take action, some sort of corrective action if that percentage drops below 9%, and it gets worse if it drops below 6%. We're not going to let that happen. So there's quite a bit of range there. And again, just for the purposes of our discussion, each percentage point that we approve or reduce, it has a roughly $3 million impact on school budgets and school employee budgets. Okay. Do I yield back to Bobby Joe? Bobby.
Yes, please.
Joe.
Okay, I'm going to share with you and the email that I received. Can you see the email from Blue Cross with a chart?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Lisa says no. Lisa, can you see it? Oh, okay. Just wanted to make sure. Okay, so the chart that they've created for us here was just to give us an idea of if we did certain scenarios, what the impact to our budget or the impact to our net position would be. And I just want, and Chris can talk about this as well, but these are really just pie in the sky numbers. You know, these are numbers that are projected out through FY24. So we're talking a long time out from here. But what we're looking at, so the scenario we originally kind of came to was looking at adding a 0.7 to get it to a 12. And then when Blue Cross told us, you know, we're going to be losing net position by doing that, then we actually had agreed to go up to a 13. But when they provided us with this information, we talked again today, and we were looking at more of a 12.5. And with that, if all else stays the same, and we know that all else never stays the same, we would be looking at a dip to the reserves to about 16.5. Still adding about 3 million to reserves, 3.4, but we would have a lower percentage than we were going into. So that is essentially eating at some of the reserves, even by adding in 1.2. So it is slightly less. If we came in at the 11.3, it would be probably somewhere in, what would you say, the $40 million range, Chris? If we kept, I was just looking at, if we kept this at the 0 instead of adding 0.7, so we'd be closer to like the $40 million range as opposed to 47, 48. So as a management team, we talked and we came to the agreement of the 12.5, the 12.5 average price. I do have some see, I'll just show you. I think you can see that. Let me just open it up. I did kind of a side by side to show, okay, folks are bound to get an increase based on these rates, whether we like it or not. I agree with you, Joel. None of us like it. None of us want to pay these higher amounts, but it's kind of what we're faced with as far as with inflation. So just, these are the rates that folks are paying today for the gold CDHP. So I know this is a lot of information, so I'm going to go through and show you where it is. So this is what the current rate is today for folks in the gold CDHP. This is like 90+% of the membership, and that's why we focused on it. The minimum is the 11.4. So, you know, just to get enough to pay claims is 11.4. If we went up to 12, if we went to 12.6, which is kind of how it sugared out with when Blue Cross did the increase for us, or to maintain that position, these are all the different variances of rate increases. So if we hop over to the yellow section here, the members, so in green is what the members are paying today on a monthly basis. You can average it sort of by 2, you know, dividing it by 2 for twice a month, but of course that doesn't come out exactly right. But the minimum increase a single is going to see beginning next July would be $19, going from 167 to 186. That's just to keep just the 11.4, which is enough to pay admin and pay claims. And then a family is looking at 52.91. So this is the increase with the 11.4. So
is that monthly?
That's a monthly amount, yes. So it's $5 a week, basically.
No, that's a monthly difference. I
That's
mean,
a monthly difference. That's the increase from 167 to 186. So when we're looking at what's the member going to be impacted by, they're already paying this today out of their paycheck, so it's already out. So this is an additional amount that they're paying out of their paycheck. If we go up to the 1.2% increase, which is basically the 12.6. So I don't think I finished doing this. I'm sorry. I was literally doing this. So let me hide this one because this one's not correct. So the 0.7% increase to get it to 12%, that increases the increase by $1 for a member, or $278 for a family.
over 11.4.
Exactly. So they're getting a 52.91. Now they're up to a 55. So the difference between doing the 11.4 and the 12 is $3 a month for a family. To bring it to all the way up to 13, which was to keep us at our current net position, it was a difference of $7.43 a month for a member or for a family. So the 1.2 is somewhere kind of in the middle of this, somewhere between $2 and I think it was like $5.50. Is that what you came up with, John?
I think so.
Yeah, something along that line. So my point is that yes, they're paying this today. We have to get this beginning in July in order to just pay the claims out. How do we increase it by $1 or $2 in order to keep our net position in a good spot, in the current spot?
All right. I hope you all followed that. It was, so if I understand it right, we're looking at 11.3, except that we're looking at 12.5, right? I mean, that's
12.5 will keep us theoretically in the same treading water where we are today, the same surplus, about 0.5% less.
I don't think
for all purposes.
we're not treading water if we are maintaining reserves in excess of what our target is, John. So
When I say treading water, I mean we're staying where we are today, less 0.5%.
okay, but we're not treading water now. Okay, I just want to make sure. You know, our reserves have been as low as 3% earlier in this century. They've been as high as 34% about a decade or so ago. We hit on 15% with the approval of the state, And, you know, we're talking, however many pennies were involved in each family, we're still talking about a $3 million cumulative difference per percentage point in school budgets. I'm not going to push beyond this. I just want to make sure that when we decide this, we understand that we have the capacity within our existing policy to basically to go below 15% if we wanted to, but we could save some money by simply going to 16 to 15% without skipping a beat. And so it's sort of, this is sort of my attempt in the name of the people we represent. That's all. Further
So,
questions?
I would
Comment?
like to make one point, Joel. There's one piece of information that is not reflected in these numbers. And
Okay.
that is what the market is doing. Okay, so
Fair-
that's an
fair enough.
added variable to this conversation. So I just want to bring that out. The health plan lost $1.6 million in the market last year. Okay, after interest and dividends earnings, this is actually close to
almost as much as I did.
so close to $2 million was negative market change. And then we were able to offset with a little bit of interest and dividends to net down to 1.6 million. So when we're talking about, you know, buffering a percentage point, well, you could lose that in the market this year too. So if we have the perfect storm, we still have COVID claims out there. We still have unknowns. We have a lot of rising inflation, which is going crazy. Then we have negative market performance, which is continuing as of right now. Those things can collide to really put us in a position where we do drop below the 50. So I just want to bring that.
I understand
aware.
that. And I want to point out that in my vast experience in this business, not much. It's always the people most concerned about budgets. I used to be one who act conservatively. And it's people like me in my current position where I want to say, why do we have to do that? I don't think the whole purpose of the net position policy is to ensure us that we have sufficient resources to operate as that buffer in the event of a perfect storm. And our policy approved by the state says 15% is the target. And we have maintained for the last half dozen years a net position below 15% without skipping a beat. So the notion of maintaining the current net position of roughly 17%, which reflects a 5% increase in this past year, seems excessive to me.
Yeah, well, even the 12.5 doesn't account for that. That would bring us down to 16. What is it, 16.5, Bobby Joe? Or 16?
We can do the arithmetic. If we end up saying we want to maintain it at 16%, we can do that. If we want to say 15%, then we can adjust accordingly. If we want to go to 14%, we can do it. I'm running out of patience with myself here, so I will yield to Tracy and then to John.
Oh, let's let John go first.
Oh, okay.
So I was just going to say, I think it's important for everyone to know the reason we were trying to get to 15 the past few years, and we were incrementally including monies in the rates to get us to 15. The reason we all of a sudden jumped to 15 was because Visitors left. It's a ratio. When Mark and Bob and Joe and I talked about it, we said, you've got 20 cupcakes, you've invited 25 people to a party, now you don't have enough. Oh, 10 people aren't coming. Now you have enough. It was not so much that we built reserves to a point where they were so high. It's just that a bunch of people left. It changed the ratio. So I think that's important to notice that
It is, but changing the ratio doesn't change our policy's target of 15%.
But there's a lot of uncertainty with that. We don't know what that group leaving is going to do to things. As Chris said, we don't know about the investment market. So there's just a lot of uncertainty this year. I just want to make sure people understand.
I'm coming across more strongly than I intend. I understand there are mitigating circumstances here. Tracy.
So I was just going to ask for a little history lesson on what DFR was encouraging us to consider as we looked towards reserves for rate setting. My impression was that DFR wanted us to build those reserves, and get much closer to where we are now, but maybe my memory is wrong.
Well, it depends on the range of one's memory, and I left for a couple of years myself, but I think it's probably safer to say that DFR has expressed over the years greater concern that we not maintain our reserves beyond what we need.
That's not my recollection.
Well, that's mine.
Chris, do you have?
But I think, but Tracy, I think we're
So-
both right depending on the years involved. So
So I have a recent feedback. It's somewhat unofficial, but when I sent the financial statements over to DFR as of June 30th, the unaudited, which are in your packet, the response from KC over there, which is the actuary, was that he was extremely excited to see us up to 17%. We're finally there. And
Okay.
I'd like to, hopefully this continues despite the market. So
yeah,
that
that's-
was his back initially, was that he, my opinion of DFR is, yes, they don't want to overburden the districts, but they want to make sure that we're always financially solvent. So
as do we.
they will always err on the side of more than less. Because
Yeah,
they're
which means-
financial.
which-
people and
Which
they're worried
unfortunately
about
means more payment by the people we represent. Mike,
Thanks, Joel. My questions, I guess, are more around the goals of the reserve and the fact that, and I agree with you, Joel, is to ask the question is a good question, right? Auditors and DFR should be looking at finance as their primary, but we are talking about money out of people's pocketbooks at a very tough time. But for me, it's not just about this year, right? If we dip into the reserves significantly and the market tanks and we lose more money or other unknown things in this next year happen, that's going to lead to higher increases next year, right? Is that my understanding that correctly?
probably. Yeah.
So I'm looking, I like the idea, Joel, that, can we go closer to our target? I'm not sure. I'd have to learn more, Chris, about why that person wants us to be at 17 when our policy says to be at 15. But in general, for responsibility to have a higher net position because we're in an era of uncertainty, I think just overall makes sense. So to summarize, I like the idea, Joel, and I'm willing to eat into some of the reserves unless I see some kind of, evidence or testimony that 17 is really the right number for this time.
Yeah, I don't think we're talking about dipping into the reserves. We're about establishing the level of reserves that we need. It's just.
Yeah, but if we're willing to eat into that and go down from 17 to, even 16 and a half, that's using some of the reserves to ease some of the pain. I mean, maybe I'm using the wrong word.
It really isn't. It's using our members' money to bolster the reserves. Depends on your characterization, but we're not sitting on this money. We're collecting more money than we will need to meet our obligations for claims and our policy obligation to be at around 15%.
Okay.
We can be more conservative if we want, but we also, there's room there for reasonable people, obviously, to disagree about it. Is there any further comment that Mark?
Just by virtue of a little bit of a history lesson for those of you who are relatively new to this, and I think it plays off of the recent exchange between Tracy and Joel on this. Back in the day, and I mean way back in the day, before Bobby Joe and John's time for sure, our net position target was 20%. Okay. And we eventually had an actuarial analysis internally, took a hard look at the size of the pool, the history of rate increases, and determined that 15% was in fact a more reasonable number. And DFR agreed with that as we worked through the net position policy with them. KC has been at DFR for an extended period of time, certainly knows his business, but, and I say this with the utmost respect for him, he never met a healthy reserve he wasn't happy with. He it doesn't surprise me in the least that 17 would have made him happy. That's not necessarily a reflection on our decision to go to 16.5 or whatever number it ultimately arrives at. But KC is paid to look at our world, analyze it through a particular lens, and his lens generally tends to be, understandably, on the more conservative side. And also, just to underscore a point that Bobby Joe made, in that we are raising, our reserves actually will be growing somewhat, right, by virtue of a 16.5, or excuse me, by virtue of a 13 or a 12.5 or even a 12, we would be adding to reserves.
Right.
But our net position percentage, for the reasons John talked about, would be going down. So just so we're clear that we're not shrinking the reserve, the net position percentage is going down. The reserves are actually going up. It's a little confusing, but.
It's a difference between addition and multiplication by percentages, I guess. Chris.
So the 11.3, just to kind of add to what Mark just said, that's kind of our break even. So you're right. I mean, if we go higher than the 11.3, we're going to add a little bit of money to reserves, hopefully, assuming that the market doesn't eat that up on us, which it could. But actually what I raised my hand was just, we're throwing around a lot of numbers, and I just wanted to kind of maybe say one statement that maybe helps put it in some context. If you think about it, if we maintain 15% of our expenses as a net position, because that's what that ratio is. We're comparing annual expenses to how much net position we have, how much equity we have, okay? That is 7.8 weeks. So not even 2 months worth of expenses. And all of our reserves are gone. So I just want to throw that out there, because so if something really, really significantly changed the landscape, then we are only retaining, and I know that the board is comfortable with this 15% target, and I know DFR approved it. I guess what I'm just trying to say to you is we're not talking about a 100% target here. You know, we're talking about a 15% target. So that can get eaten up very, very, very quickly. I mean, I sign weekly claims runs that can be up to $12 million a week. Okay, we're holding 49 million. So if we have a blip that it even lasts for 3 or 4 months, that's significant, then all of our money's gone, and we're pulling it all out of Vanguard when the market's in a poor position. So I know that I'm being conservative in some ways with throwing that out there, but just being the person who has to pay these claims. And, you know, a couple of times when we did get our ratios were lower, I was worried about cash flow. I was thinking we're going to have to pull some money out of Vanguard. And what's the right timing to do this so we don't lose on our investments? That sort of thing going on. So I just want to.
Half a year ago would have been it.
Yeah. So I just want to give some context around it. You know, it's big dollars. When you think about $50 million, it seems like a lot of money, and it is. But on the flip side, when you can pay out $12 million in a given week, it doesn't go all that far. So that's all I wanted to kind of add.
All right. Well, one more point by yours truly, and it's our use of language. Conservative in this discussion cuts both ways. I'm sitting here believing that I'm behaving very conservatively on behalf of the people we represent. And others are appropriately using the term to describe their sense of the fiscal viability for the organization that represents those people. I'm not quite sure how to proceed here. We need a motion to start active consideration of the rate. And someone can either make a motion, pick a number out of the air, or make a motion that's pegged to a specific
The
percentage.
management team was recommending 12.5, if that's a good place to start.
I'll move the management team's recommendation with appreciation for the agonizing study that I think you've engaged in, looking at higher higher increases and lower increases, and I think an attempt to compromise and address all interests.
Can you, Bobby Joe, can you bring up that email with the, so we can make sure I'm understand the impact of that 12.5?
Muted.
She's working on it. You can see it in her face.
And actually, we said 12.5. What did Blue Cross smooth it? Is it actually 12.6?
I think it's 12.6.
Once everything's, but some are lower and some are
In the
higher.
plans, yeah.
I'll show you both
Okay,
things.
that's only $300,000.
I know.
It's
We
a
tried those.
0.1, not a 1.
Can you see it now? So yeah, so what they're saying, this is the scenario that we're going with.
No, nowhere there does it tell us what we're doing. Does that middle scenario 2 translate into a 12.5%?
It's a 12 point, it's a 12.6 overall.
12.6% increase, but it doesn't say.
Yeah, the middle scenario is 12.6.
Sorry, I think I paused my screen.
Okay, and so, all right, okay.
Sorry, I can put that back up. I just lost track of it.
Mike, can you get it back up again?
Mike,
Yeah, I don't know if we had a second, but
not yet.
I recommend, Tracy, that you restate your motion or withdraw and restate. Resubmit. Let's make sure it's accurate to that scenario.
I moved that we accept I'm going to turn off my video, sorry. I move that we accept the management team's recommendation and expressed or with appreciation for the deep study the management team engaged in and the attempt to compromise in terms of utilization or anticipation of reserves and impact on ratepayers.
Did you get all that, Bobby? Joe?
I'm gonna have to go back to the video.
All on you. All right.
I do want to share the actual rate sheet with you guys. So you can see. So the 12.6 is at the bottom. That's the average.
All right. So whose document is this?
This was created by Blue Cross. And it is our rate sheet for scenario number 2. Adding 1.2 to reserves.
Adding 1.2 from what to reserves?
From the 11.4 to 12.6. The 11.4 was the minimum, and this is bringing us to 12.6.
Yes. For
I
the
thought it was
purpose-
11.3.
I still don't understand this. They want to increase it from 11.4 to 12.6 to increase our reserves above 15% or above 16% or what?
To maintain our reserves and use about 0.5% of reserves.
To maintain our reserves at what percent? What targeted percent?
That was
16%, 16.5%?
That was the 16.5 scenario.
So a
All right.
12.6 rate increase yields, all things coming
Right.
out wash,
Right.
a
16.5.
16.5 net position.
All right. Mike, did you want to say something? I think you did.
I'm going to second the motion.
Further discussion? Peg,
Yeah, no, I guess I have a question that will help me make up my mind on how I'm going to handle this, but why is it the gold CDHP that's a 7% increase where all the others are at 12?
They all do get the same amount. It's just that the other ones needed a smaller amount to begin with. So they came in lower to begin with. So they all got the same level of increase. It just, I can show you. I should say they all got the additional percentage the same. I can show you the
it
original.
doesn't say that. Why doesn't it say that?
I don't know. I can show it.
Right. I mean, they all say 12% except for the CDHP.
Right, because the CDHP plan had worse experience and was getting a higher increase regardless, even at the 11.4 or the 11.3,
All right, so 12.7 is a real number. It's not blended somehow. It's the,
right? So the
Yeah.
overall is 12.6 when you blend them, but there's so much smaller membership.
all right, so the 12.6 is the average of all of them, including the primary one to the
That's
CDP.
And people were encouraged to join, individual members, not our school board members, but individual subscribers were encouraged to join the Gold CDHP. And so that's the one that has the greatest increase consistently, it seems, over the years.
Yeah,
Because that's where all the experience and the exposure and
That's where
utilization.
the lion's share of the membership is. You can see the numbers to the far left.
Mhm.
They also have the lowest out-of-pocket exposure, and their HRA takes up the most of the out-of-pocket exposure compared to the other plans.
Could you, I'm sorry to interrupt, could you bring up that Excel spreadsheet where it shows the dollar impact?
17 tabs later.
this is just dollar impact on subscribers, not in the aggregate.
No, this is not aggregate. I was trying to, Mark and I at the time were talking about the impact to subscribers at different levels. So we tried to say, okay, a family on a Gold CDHP plan, what does that mean to them? That's what these dollars represent.
But it's harder to break it down to a supervisory union because different sizes, but you can
No, I
easily do it to a group.
When I mean aggregate, I mean total subscriber population, not just the school district.
So
Lisa?
the proposal,
Sorry.
the proposal that's,
Hold on, Lisa. I'm sorry, Mike, start over. I'm sorry.
the proposal that's being put forward is the blue, is that correct?
It's actually in between. It's in, I know, it's in between the 0.7 and the 1.7.
Okay, thank you.
And I can get that exact amount, but
All
you
right.
can see it's, going to be somewhere between an additional $1 or $2.68 for a single, on top of what they were already facing.
You mean the 11.4 on top of 11.4? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so they were already, yes, so they were already facing this addition.
Got it.
So we were-
So if it goes to 12.1, it's that column. And if it goes to 13.1, it's the last column.
Right,
And we're talking about, as you say, smack between those two.
right.
All right.
These were the first numbers that we were talking about. That's why we created them. And then we started talking about the 12.5%. So,
And we didn't get to the 12.5 until late this afternoon.
yeah.
Okay.
Are we just feeding into the inflationary push if we go above the preserved position? It just seems to me that we're, you're saying, oh, we don't know what the market's going to do, but if everybody acts, I don't know, just a thought. Maybe I'm off base.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. I think that's a rhetorical question, the answer to which is, yeah, I guess there's room for disagreement, but pretty much obvious. If I'm not mistaken, we merely have Tracy's rather wordy motion without a second. Let me tell you what I intend to do. I intend to offer an amendment, but I think, Tracy, in the interest of just facilitating this, if you could shorten if you could leave off the editorialing.
Sure. Well, we do have a second. I think Mike seconded it. And my motion is to accept the recommendation of the management team.
Okay. And that translates into 12.6%. And that translates into a net position of, fill in the blank for me.
16.5.
16.5%. Okay. Is there a second? I don't think there was. Maybe, Mike, there was there not? I apologize. Oh, and then I asked if there was further discussion. And so with your permission, I don't see any other hands up. I will offer an amendment. Nothing like a foolish consistency in my life. Consistent with what I have said during this discussion, I move that the rate increase approved by this board for the health program be set at the percentage increase that will reflect a net position of 15%, which I believe translates into roughly a $4.5 million reduction in the cost to our members. So I'm not quite sure if I worded that correctly because I don't.
Point of order.
Yes.
I do think that fundamentally that is different from Tracy's motion. And so if she's recommending that we take the recommendation of the management team, and you're recommending that we don't, I would prefer that we vote on Tracy's motion. And then, of course, if that doesn't pass, then you can raise a separate motion.
Okay. So let me give you the insight into what I thought. I thought that dealing with my motion, which is less likely to pass, frankly, than Tracy's, would facilitate the overall discussion and not put any of us on record as having say yay or nay to the staff. So I don't think, and I think your point of order, I don't think it's well taken. I think the point of the motion was to establish a rate increase of 12.6%. And which would establish the net position projected at 16.5%. And so I just want us to consider reducing that to a rate increase that would result in a projected net position of 15%, which is right on the target of our policy. Tracy?
Could we should probably speak about our net position in estimated terms,
Yes, that's fair.
since it's not a definitive number. In fact, it's probably not even the number that we thought it was right now, based on what it was yesterday.
All that's fair. That's why I think I use the word projected. Or I'm trying to find an adjective that would get us off the dime about the preciseness of it all. Anyhow, so Mike, I don't think your point is well taken, and I think it is in order for amendments to be proposed. And so I propose that we adopt a rate increase that reflects a net position projected at 15%. Is there a second? Lisa, is there any discussion beyond what we've already discussed? Seeing none.
Wait, can I ask a question? What is that rate increase?
I can't tell you.
Oh, we don't know.
We
Okay.
don't have that information. I think it would be less than the 11 point, I'm sorry, I know we keep going around different numbers, but the overall 11.3, right, Chris? Because if the 11, they had said if we went with 11.3, we would need 1.7 to.
No, I don't know what it would be, because if we went with the 12.6, that was going to erode us almost a full percentage, because we're at 17.6 now, and that was going to bring us down to 16.5. So that took a percentage right there. So I mean, I don't know if 11.3 ends up keeping us where we are or not. I guess then we would have to come up with some sort of predictor on what the market was going to do for the next 2 years, because that affects our net position, which is one of the items that you calculate against to get the target. So
another one of the
I don't know.
Another one of the provisions in our net position policy calls on us to consider mitigation of rate increases as well. So there are about half a dozen factors that go into the consideration of how we reach the 15% target. I think my proposed amendment is precise enough to come up with the percentage increase sufficient to establish the projected target and net position at the 15% target that we've adopted as our policy. So, and there's been a second, and so we're discussing the amendment, and Mike.
Thank you, Joel. I feel uncomfortable with being asked to set a rate with using a projection as the barometer to set that rate. So as a board, I think that we're asked to set a rate, and there should be a numerical rate that we decide, that we agree on and vote on.
It would be good if we had it. All right, so I guess somebody wants to offer a friendly amendment to my amendment to establish the rate at 11.4%, which is a yield of some sort on my part from the 15% target. So frankly, I can't tell you. Can I move to amend my own amendment? I think I can, with Lisa's permission.
You could withdraw your amendment with Lisa's.
And make it again. All right, with Lisa's permission, I'll withdraw my proposed amendment in favor of one that establishes the rate for the health program for fiscal 24 at 11, and I think it's 0.4%. Was that what you, 11.4?
It's actually, the entire average is 11.3, 11.4 specifically.
11.3% as the average, which you will understand, at 11.3%. Okay, Lisa, would you second that one? Okay, thank you. All right. Now, any further discussion? The proposal before us is whether to adopt a rate increase of 11.3% for fiscal 24 in our health program. Ready for a vote, Tracy?
Can I make one comment? I guess since we're drawing upon the net position policy as the basis for, or at least part of the basis for our recommendation, just want to point out that the actuarial analysis of variability, so to me, that's margin of error is 4%. And I will let board members think about that 4% variability number from the actuaries as you're considering this motion.
Forgive me, I don't know this. I heard the numbers, I heard the words, I don't understand. Where does that information come from?
It's in the supporting documentation from the 2019 net position policy.
Well, okay. All right. Again, that policy doesn't trigger any action on the part of the board unless there's a 6% drop in that position from the target of 15%. We probably ought to have had it in front of us. I didn't know we were going to get so directly involved in that policy. All right. Any further discussion? All right. All in favor of the motion to adopt as the fiscal 24 health program rate increase at 11.3%, please signify by raising your hand. All opposed? Okay, and Bobby Joe, I think you know this. When we don't have unanimous decisions, the minutes will reflect the vote.
Okay. Yep, I got it. Thank you.
And the voters, yeah. And I must have missed it. I know I noted it for the last hour. The Geo is not with us.
Correct.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, by virtue of our decision-making process, the motion fails, despite the fact that there's a majority support of it. Okay. That brings us back to the initial motion made by Tracy and seconded by Mike to establish, I think, the rate increase for the health program for fiscal 24 at 12.6%. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye or raise your hands. All those opposed? I'm sitting this one out. for obvious reasons. But thank you all. That vote 4-1 with 2 members who are appointed by Vermont NEA and 2 members appointed by the School Boards Association means that this passes, and we can move on to the dental rate discussion, which I presume will be a good deal shorter. Thank you all for putting up with that. I think that having a discussion like that and reflecting and having that discussion reflected in our minutes will at least acknowledge to our members that we give serious consideration, not just to what the actuaries say, but to what they're feeling in their pocketbooks. Okay, thanks very much. Moving to the dental rate discussion. Yield to the same twosome, I guess. I forget what you guys said before about this one.
That's okay.
This
So-
one's Bobby Joe's, baby.
All right.
This one's quick, I think. So the VEHI dental renewal for FY24, as you know, we've had unlike the health position, we have a really strong reserve for the dental, upwards of 85%. Our renewal came in at about 13%. Actually, I was going to share this on the screen, see if we can look at it at the same time. Ranging from a -2.1 up to a 24.2. So in the years past, we have used reserves to either reduce or smooth these costs to the members. And we are looking to do that again today. Strategies in the past, we've waived the administrative charge, which this year is about $570,000. Like we did last year, instead of doing an overall decrease or a zero for everyone, we like to give those that really need a rate increase that are 12% or higher, at least a little bit of an increase so their rates don't get too far out of whack. So after 7 or 8 years of rate holds, we did do this last year where anyone up to a 5% received a 0, 5 to 12 was 2, and 12.1 or higher was 4%. So we would like to do that again this year. By doing this, it's using about $290,000 in reserves. Or we could also include the administrative costs, which would be up to $860,000 in reserves that we would use. The management team did review this with our net position with dental. We're comfortable with using $860,000 in reserves in order to keep an overall increase of 2.1% for our members for the dental plan. So again, instead of having a range from -2 to 24%, we've got a range of 0 to 4. So that is our recommendation. And I have a potential motion even written for you if you'd like to use that.
Okay. I'm a little confused, but I may not be. What you're suggesting is that I don't know who is in the needed increase column. Maybe that would help. What is that? What do those percentages mean? What do they refer to?
So that's referring to if we gave them a rate increase, if they were paying.
Who's them?
The
Everybody?
districts. These are districts. So all of the districts have different dental plans, basically.
Ah, that helped. All
So
right.
based on each district, one district might need a -2 and
All right.
others might need a positive 24%.
I got it. Thank you. And
They're individually rated. It's very different from how the health pool operates.
I understand a little bit now. Thank you. So that means that in order to achieve these percentage reductions, we would use $860,000 in reserves. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
What impact would that have on our 85% net position in the dental program?
I don't know if I know that. Do you know that, Chris?
Well, we have 7 million right now in net position. So what was it you said we would use?
60?
Yeah.
Got
And
it. Okay.
And
So-
that doesn't include things like was it Chris that you mentioned specifically?
So it's 81%, Joel.
Down from 85%.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I know it's insubstantial, but man, 81%. Why are we sitting on that much?
We've been trying to lose money on this plan for,
Yeah,
for many years.
I guess I know that. So
Yeah.
why are we quote failing unquote to do so?
Well, part of it, the market has been generous over the last couple of years to us. Last year, it hurt us a bit, but we had a lot of really positive market change, which helps. And
So we were above 85%, I take it. Okay.
yeah. And I mean, we lost almost $1 million on this program last year between operations and market. But I mean, we went 7 to 8 years at a rate hold. We did a decrease 1 year. I mean, we really haven't touched the rates,
Yeah. Okay. Tracy, and then we can reduce this to a motion and get on with it.
Just before we get to a motion, I think before COVID, we were talking about a more comprehensive review of the dental program and maybe looking at narrowing the focus or narrowing the menu of plans and maybe looking at the benefits within the plans themselves. And I would love to, if the management team feels this is an appropriate time, I'd love to turn back into that. I've never forgotten the stats that we got at one point where, I don't know, a quarter or a third of our subscribers don't get regular cleanings. And that stuck with me. And I would love to use to explore ways we might use our reserves to help people get good dental care.
Yeah,
As part of
Tracy,
their overall
20%.
health.
20% of our members, the last time we looked, were not even going in for a cleaning.
Yeah.
And
And
we
of course-
actually did increase the benefit so much that there is an annual maximum for each of these benefits, and each school gets to choose their own, or each district. So some might have 500 where other people have $1,500 or $2,000 worth of annual benefits. So we would like to see that more. We would like that to be increased across the board, but in some ways we are making districts have a richer benefit that eventually, might catch up. So, but we definitely are interested in that too. But one thing we did in the past is preventive care used to be included in that annual maximum, and we removed it from the annual maximum. So now your, routine cleaning, exam, and x-rays are excluded from that annual maximum. So we did put that into place a couple of years ago, but there's definitely room for other programs or plan improvements.
And the other thing is that the wellness team did start became aware of this, and so they're doing some things around dental in the recent years that haven't been there in the past. So hopefully that will start moving that bar.
Yeah, I thought about what Tracy said, and I mean, it's crazy. We live in a world where my dog can get a van that comes to the house for like a shampoo, a nail clip, and a teeth cleaning, but people can't get dental care. It's nuts.
That's what you've been trying to say for the last 5 minutes.
No, but that's what we need. Is we need a dental van.
I get it. I do get it. All right. So it seems to me the motion needs to be the proposed motion needs to be a little worked on. Let me try my hand at it, and somebody can make the motion to approve the use of $860,000 in reserves in order to waive the administrative costs of the dental program paid to VEHI and enable us to smooth rate changes within the bands used in fiscal 22 to 0, 2%, or 4%. I meant for fiscal 24. I meant 23 instead of 22.
I make that motion.
Is there a second? Did I see a hand, Lisa, or was that random? A random arm movement? Okay, thank you. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, let's vote on this. All in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. That would be all of us voting. No opposed, and we've adopted the dental rate for fiscal 24. Thank you very much. Chris, we are moving to a discussion of last year's financials.
Okay,
last year meeting fiscal 22, which ended June 30th, if I got this right. So go ahead.
Yep. so in your packet, you have a memo that I drafted out on August 9th. And then you have the income statement, which is the combining statement of revenue, expenses, change in net position. You have the combined statement of net position, which is the balance sheet. And then you have your budget to actual. So we've kind of talked about some of the highlights of the year in our discussion around rate setting, but I did want to bring the key points to your attention and allow you to have some time to ask any questions you might have. So overall, FY22, we had a gain of $11.6 million. So that's your third column over, way down to the bottom. If you look at all the locations, which is health and dental combined, we had a gain of just over 11.6, compared to a gain of 590,000 the prior year. So as you can see, these programs, it's a lot of money and it moves, and they're difficult to project. Of that, 12.5 came from the health program, $966,000 loss on the dental program. So when we set the rates for the health program, we knew that we had a lot of unknowns. We did project when the rates were redone. So when we were looking, we originally set the rates way ahead, like right now we're setting for FY24. So we do a couple of looks at where we're going to land a year. So when we updated these rates during the FY23 rating process, we expected the health program to gain about 11.1 million. That ended up at, and that's before the market. So we ended up at 14.2. 2.1 million was a positive from the prior year's claims development, which means that they over reserved a spot in FY22. And the rest was a result of actually FY22 operations. We ended up, I'm still on that other sheet, Bobby Joe.
Okay.
Thank you.
Where on that sheet do we find the numbers you just were talking about, the last 2 or 3?
Okay, so I was talking about, so if you come down most of the way down, about 80% of the way down, you'll see total net operating gain or loss.
Okay.
I was sort of focusing in on that number because that's prior to investment. So I kind of like to talk about operations and then investments separately. And then, so of that 14.2, which was a gain for the health program, if you come up under operating expenses, the second item down, you'll see claims expense prior year is a negative 2.1 million. So what I'm saying is that of that 14.2, about 12 of it was because of the current year operations, and 2.1 of the gain was because the FY21 claims came in better than projections.
And that sort of number, whatever its amount, that happens every year, right? We
always have a number up there. So for FY21, it actually was pretty close. It was 2.1 million. We've had numbers where it's a couple of $1 million going in the other direction. So that can swing.
May I ask a question? Yes, I may.
Sure.
This is a follow-up on John's point about Vistor's leaving us. To what extent is that net operating gain attributable, do you suppose, to the fact that we don't represent that there are some?
I would say that doesn't have a driver on our bottom line.
Okay.
Because when we set Vistor's rates, we're basically trying to break even on them. I mean, now you do the best you can, but so we took out the revenue for 6 months and we took out the expenses for 6 months. Right. So when you come down to an operating gain or loss, it makes no difference.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So then you get down to the operating or non-operating revenues and expenses. And as you can see, what I was talking about earlier, we had some interest income for both programs. Market, we lost $2.5 million in the market, $555,000 from dental, $2 million from health. And I am seeing that trend continue into FY23 at this point. The market is is trending poorly. We haven't lost another 2 million, but the market is trending poorly at this point.
The inference I'm drawing here is that the amount invested in dental is about 25% or more of what we have available for the health program. That's not that's counterintuitive to me. Shouldn't
So
the
if you
dental
come to the
program-
second page over here, let's go to
Yeah.
the next statement because that shows our assets. So for the health program, we
Thank you.
have cash and cash equivalents of 51 million. And for the dental program, we have 7.7 million. Okay.
Okay, I mean, it's.
We have more of that money. So dental, we carry a small amount of cash in the cash account, and the majority of it is in the market at Vanguard because we don't need the cash. In the health program, we do have about 20 million that sits in our checking account
Okay.
that is not affected. I mean, we have a little bit of interest off it, but basically it's not affected by the market
Okay.
because it's not out there.
That answers my question. Thank you.
So that's, I think, where your difference is, because just because the cash, we have to keep ready cash available to pay claims. Whereas the dental program, that amount is much smaller, so we
Okay.
can invest more of it.
Okay.
Okay. So, the balance sheet, when you look at it, we have mostly our biggest asset obviously is cash. And then we have some contribution receivable from our members at year end. Other assets of 5.4 million on the health side, that's made up of a working fund deposit at Blue Cross Blue Shield. So they hold about a week's worth of claims on average on their books so that they can send the checks out and not wait for us to reimburse them before checks are actually mailed. Liabilities, claims, we have claims related liabilities of 7 million for health and 665,000 for dental. So that's the majority of that is the actuarial estimate at year end of what they perceive as outstanding liabilities. You may notice if you go over as of 6/30/21, the liabilities were much higher. They were at 17.7 million as compared to 7 million this year. That, what is driving that is pharmacy rebates. So when I look at what the number is, the bottom line number, there are a couple of components to that actuarial report. There's the outstanding medical claims that they expect, and then that is reduced by outstanding pharmacy rebates. So as of 6/30 this year, they expected a significant larger portion of rebates still outstanding due to two factors. One was that there's actually a timing difference of when they're being paid. So some of it we didn't have as much cash in the door in FY21 we didn't have as much cash in the door in FY22 for those rebates as we did in FY21. So that brought that number up, but also the pharmacy rebates had gone up as well. So part of it was timing, part of it was an increase in actual rebates.
Okay.
So then you get your total liabilities, which other than that, we've got some prepaid contributions. That's again, timing of member payments, a little bit of accounts payable, and bringing us down to the net position we've just been talking about so much, 49.4 million for health and just under 7 million for dental.
Quick question, what's that 100K other liability?
The 100K other liabilities, it's money that we owe to Visters, actually. And what happened is when they severed, when they moved away from us, we had a process going. It was around EGWIP, which I can't remember actually what EGWIP stands for.
You don't
But
want
it
to know
was
today, Mike. We'll get it to you.
Employer group waiver program.
I knew Mark would help me out there.
Okay.
So basically it was something that the state worked with the federal government on. They would get rebates coming through. There were offsetting printing fees and things like that. When they were with us in full, it was a monthly amount that we would get in and then basically just pass it right through. It would come through to us from Blue Cross Blue Shield. We pass it right off to Visters. And what happened is that when we stopped having that activity mid-year, that amount of activity, all that was happening was we were getting charged for their admin and their print production fees. And I asked the state to reimburse us, and they said they wouldn't. So they said, well, we don't have a capacity for paying you back. You can just sit on it. So I said, well, the next time a payment comes in, I'm going to hold $100,000 then, so I
Okay.
can offset it. And they agreed to that. So that's what that's about, because I didn't feel like it was appropriate for us. We passed it through promptly to them, but when it came the other way, they were not prepared to do so. So
Okay.
I'm holding the money in anticipation of fees.
Thank you.
So
Good
good question.
Okay.
And then I won't go into the budget to actual in detail. That's the next statement. Only to state that we came under budget. We didn't have anything blaring. We ended the year under budget by 292,000 in general operating expenses and another 133,000 in wellness expenses. So there was nothing in there that I looked at when I went through it, you know, with a fine tooth comb line by line. There was nothing there that was jumping out as concerning. Operating expenses were paid appropriately and kept in line. So any questions on the financials?
Tracy.
I just want to check my memory, and I think I recall that our operating expenses were a little bit lower due to COVID. Is that, or at least in part due to COVID and changes in the way we do things, and we can't necessarily expect that every year? Is that true?
Yeah, I mean,
Travel. Yeah.
yeah, travel went down. You know, there were certain things that in-person conferences for wellness were not held. They were doing Zoom meetings, things like that. So yeah, definitely the bottom line was impacted by COVID. You know, even on the VISBIT admin expense, if you think about building costs, you know, people weren't in the building for a period of time. So you're not using the same amount of electricity and things like that. We're all using our electric bills at home, which, you know, so I would say that COVID did have an effect. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Anything else? I don't think we have to take action. I appreciate all the work as usual, Chris, because none of us is going to do it. But thank you very much. All right. There are two items under Vermont NEA, and let's go through it. We need to approve the Vermont NEA service agreement for next year.
So the one that I attached was the current version. Well, the one that was just ended, and we need to update it and include the updated FY23 amount. But are there any other changes that were being requested, or?
Thank you. I didn't know myself what was this about. We have the amount in the budget. So okay, all right. Well, we might be able to save some time, Mike. Sorry, Mike.
No. So my questions or comments is really around some of the things that are stated in that contract around reviewing performance. And I know, Mark, you absolutely hit on the quarterly, hey, here's what we did. But there's other statements in there about, hey, in April, we're going to do this, in May, we do this. Now, I know, I don't even remember when I joined. I joined in May, I think. Do we do what's in that contract in terms of reviewing the deliverables that are, I think there's 6 deliverables, and we're supposed to review them in May, something like that. Have we been doing that?
I don't think we have the habit of doing that. I think those provisions are relatively recent, and I just don't think that we've wrapped our heads around the details. But we know what Mark's been doing, and we can infer pretty much how, if Vermont NEA were to write a report, I suspect that Mark would be its chief author, and the contents would be remarkably similar to what he's providing us every 3 months. Beyond that, I don't have much to offer. I don't have anything to offer.
So I'd love, Mark, you're giving a quizzical look, so I don't know if you're familiar with
No,
that.
no, Mike, I'm just like trying to locate the provision you're talking about.
So it's in the contract. It's
It could be
Section 4.
Section 4.
Section 4 says on April 15th, we're going to review and evaluate the performance. You're going to extend us something, and then in May we can make, proposals to amend the agreement, and there's a whole timeline. So
Yes.
Go ahead,
I'm sorry.
and so if we haven't been doing that, I'd love to do that next year. And Mark, I can work with you on that.
Yeah. A point
no.
well taken, Mike. I must admit, I suspect we're all in this boat together on this one. We agreed to this, and then we didn't pay attention to it, to be blunt. Except Mark's quarterly reports.
Well, my recollection, and it's more vague than I'd like it to be, is that there was a time when we did do it. And then I think the sort of locus of gravity moved more toward the quarterly report. And then there was COVID.
Yeah.
And so I think, Mike, and I'm not exactly sure when this would have happened. We may have missed a year or so in terms of that May and April and May dates. And also the May date actually requires the board to suggest changes if they wish to. In the absence of any changes, assuming we had a May meeting, that's the other thing, is that there were, I think, breaks in our normal meeting schedule for different reasons. So we may not have had a May meeting. And the issues may not have come up in the subsequent meeting. But the May meeting is obviously a board initiative. And the April one, there's no prohibition, obviously, to us doing it next year. It's still active. If people wish to see changes to the service agreement, either party.
I mean, a lot of, like Joel said, a lot of what, and if you go up to like there's 6 listed, things that you're supposed to be doing, and you do cover those in your quarterly report. I could have sworn I also read in the contract that you're supposed to give these quarterly reports. So it's weird to me that it's both. And so maybe you and I can take some time and review this. And then for next year, we can come up with something that it's a little more structured, and maybe you don't have to do double duty.
Yeah, no, I actually would welcome that review. I think that would be helpful for all of us. I think when the quarterly report came into existence, I think it was agreed to without necessarily thinking about how it integrates with these other provisions. And I think when we have that conversation, it'd probably be helpful to have Jeff Fannin, the executive director, there as well. We can all look at it together and decide what integration would facilitate this and what other revisions potentially would also help. So I'm fine with that.
Okay, great.
Thanks for raising it, Mike. I just, I think we're all equally responsible for this one. Are there other questions for today about the service agreement? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the fiscal 23 service agreement with Vermont EA?
Do we? I'm sorry, Joel. Do we have? Oh, is that the motion? Is that we're just approving it? Is there a dollar amount? Is there a term?
Yes.
What are we approving?
We approved our overall budget whenever we did that in June, perhaps, and it incorporates a dollar amount for Vermont EA, and it's on the order of $214,000.
Just sent it to me earlier. Do you have it right there, Chris?
I don't, but it's 224 or something. It's just under 225,000.
$225,000.
Yeah.
All right. And so what Bobby suggested before is that implicit in this motion is an insertion of that dollar in the agreement as written, with modifications for dates that would apply.
So I'm just going to practice making the motion. I want to make sure I have the language right. So
Good
I,
luck.
thank you. I would theoretically propose to renew the contract between, with the NEA for services rendered to VEHI for the fiscal year 23, utilizing approximately $254,000 of budgeted, a budget. Is that right?
Yeah, I
225.
think just using the amount approved for the budget, for the fiscal 23 budget.
Yeah, it's $225,177, if you want the number.
I do want the number.
But
Said
who's
There it
counting?
is,
225.
177.
177.
All right, so I move to authorize the extension of the NEA service agreement with VEHI for fiscal year 23 in the amount of $225,177.
Thank you. A friendly amendment would be to rename the NEA Vermont NEA.
Sorry.
The
Vermont.
NEA is the National Association.
I think because
Is
our
there-
bylaws
Is there go
say
ahead. Is this like a
that-
point of order, Tracy,
gonna-
or should we get a second first?
No, it's a wordy second. I'm gonna make a second. I was gonna say, I think because our bylaws, I'll turn off my video. Sorry if you're not hearing me.
Thank
I
you.
think because our bylaws, or not our bylaws, but our policies still provide that that appointees by Vermont NEA not participate in the discussion or action on the service agreement with Vermont NEA. I have to make the second, and I'm happy to do that.
I have no idea what you just said, other than that it implicates a provision of the conflict of interest policy, I presume, that has never been raised before informally. So is that what you're doing? I don't understand the import of the verbiage associated with the second.
Just reminding people of what the conflict of interest policy says, and acknowledging that Mike and I need to handle this item based on that policy.
Well, that's incorrect. Are you going to have you seconded the motion or not?
I have seconded it.
All right, we can get into a discussion of who gets to participate separately or as part of it. But we now have a maker of the motion and a second of the motion. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call for a vote. And I intend to vote, and I suggest that other appointees of Vermont NEA have an absolute right to vote on this. So that being said, all in favor of adopting the motion to enter into an agreement for fiscal 23 with Vermont NEA in accordance with the terms of the existing agreement and in the amount of $225,177, please say aye. Aye. It's unanimous. There's no reason to go further. Okay. Tracy, if you want to make a formal motion to invoke the conflict of interest provisions, feel free to do so, but it was not, it was just sort of surplusage in the context of voting on this motion, as far as I was concerned. Okay, we are here to review and accept the latest quarterly report that Mark submitted to us last week. Is there any need to review the report? Any questions associated with the report? Seeing none, all in favor of, actually, I forget. Do we accept this report, or do we just, it's there? We're going to reject it? I don't think so. Mike, what do you think? What's your
No,
thought?
I'm pretty sure I saw something in the contract that said that Vermont NEA will provide it. But it
Right.
didn't say anything. I just need- yeah.
We can accept it or not. It doesn't matter. So my
I think we've
sense.
acknowledged it in the past, maybe. Was it acknowledged?
Thank you. I think we've done that with some other documents. Why don't we do that? let the, I don't think we have to vote on this, just note for the minutes that the board acknowledged, dare I say with gratitude, Mark's most recent quarterly report,
Second.
but we're not acting on it, so.
But, I'm sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you, Mark, for that level of detail. I appreciate hearing some of the, like, there's data and then there's stories, and I appreciate reading some of those stories about some of the challenges.
How else would we read it?
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that.
Good. All right, it's 4:47. Well, here's what I think, folks. And I will say what I've said several times before. I believe that the conflict of interest policy merits and needs substantial revision to make it internally consistent and make sense of it. But we don't have time in our lives, in the way this board functions, or the way I guess public boards generally function, to do it justice. I don't quite know how to proceed, but I'm also not going to fall on my sword about the fact that I spent, 6 hours of my retired life working on the proposed revisions. So I'm not quite sure how you guys want to proceed, but I'm willing to forego consideration of it yet again, because it's not pressing on us, on our business. And the management updates and the final item for Bobby Joe and John are going to take some substantial time today. Mike?
So I think that it is worthy of consideration, especially, concerning Tracy's position on Vermont NEA members voting on the contract. So I do think it's worth our collective while, but on other boards, this kind of work would be sent to a committee, right? And that committee would then work on it and come back and with a proposal to the full board.
Man
So
after
I
my
know that
own heart.
we
Yeah.
don't have committees, but maybe a subset of us can take it offline and do some work and come back with something for the whole board to consider.
I'd be more than happy to do that. I think a subset would in fact be a committee. I don't think we can
Yeah.
avoid get around the definition of committee.
Yeah.
And I forget sitting here, I think a committee, even if it has fewer than members than a quorum of the board, is still subject to the open meeting law, which is fine, that can be done. But there's been objection up to this point. There's been insufficient support for the establishment of any committees. I'd be happy to entertain a motion to establish a committee for the limited purpose of reviewing the proposed amendments to the conflict of interest policy for later consideration by the board. Why don't I do that? I move to establish a committee for the limited purpose of reviewing the proposed amendments to the conflict of interest policy for later consideration by the board. Is there a second?
Second.
I just wonder if we should wait for Gio, since he was the one who joined in asking for it.
Joined asking for what? I'm not objecting. I want to know what Gio asked for.
This review.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I mean, we don't have to establish the members of the committee merely out of those who are present here. So we can certainly include Gio. I suspect it should be no more than 3 of us. And I suspect, frankly, that I should be one of them. So if we get to that point. So in general terms, the motion and seconded is to establish a committee for the purpose I mentioned. Any further discussion? Mike?
I would recommend that if the board is going to establish an ad hoc committee, that we designate the quantity of members and who is actually going to be a member.
All right, then if I would either ask for a friendly amendment or allow me to offer an amendment that will be friendly. My amendment should be amended so as to name the members of this proposed committee as Gio Honningberg, Mike Fisher, and Joel Cook.
I'd like to be on the committee since I was part of the committee that wrote the original policy.
Well, none of us otherwise has been, and so we'll be more than happy to confer with you, but that my motion is what my motion is. And it will, you can simply reject it and defeat the motion if you want. So,
Well,
sir, Mike.
so in the spirit of what you did with the rate setting proposal, I'm going to move to amend your motion, and with the membership of being Joel Cook, Tracy Wren, and Gio.
Okay. That's in order. Is there a second? Seeing none, the motion fails. Tracy?
I'm sorry, I was taking notes. I will second Mike's amendment.
Too late. I'm joking. God. Get a grip, please. We're just plain folks. Okay, is there a discussion about Mike's motion? Mike's proposed amendment to the motion in chief. I think we'll have might as well have a roll call on this. I'll vote first and I will vote against. I don't have the alphabet in front of me, but I have your faces in front of me. Mike, you're next.
A vote for the motion, for the amendment.
Right. Lisa? I think that's a thumbs down. Tracy?
I'll vote for the motion or the amendment.
And Peggy?
Vote against the amendment.
Okay, so Mike's proposed amendment fails, and we're back to the motion, the main motion, which is to establish the committee we talked about with the membership, including Gio, Mike, and Joel. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of establishing a committee for the purpose of reviewing the proposed changes in the conflict of interest policy for later presentation to the board, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And this is why we never have committees, Mike. Okay, all those opposed?
No,
Okay, Bobby Joe, I know you're there. I assume you got those names. Is that right? Okay. Okay, so we're back to Mike, you're the one who raised that. I had made sort of a thinly veiled proposal that we move on. Nobody can stop, frankly, Mike, you and I from conversing about this. If you'd like, at any time, but that's I leave that up to you. But if you'd like to, we can actually engage in useful conversation about all of this stuff. But Mike.
I would be happy to, Joel, but I do think that it's important that people who want to do the work, who are board members, are encouraged to do the work. And so I don't quite understand what just happened.
No, you don't. I can
right?
well understand why you don't.
So you know, in my experience as a board on boards, the committee is established, and then people sign up and say, raise their hand and say, I want to serve on this committee, or they're asked to serve on a committee. So I know that there's nothing in the bylaws about how to create committee and set membership. But if this, what we just experienced in the last few minutes, is how committees have been formed by this board, I understand why there's no committees. I did
Committees
not
have-
think of this, I did not see this as a very, very collegial way to do board work
Agreed.
and get work done.
Couldn't agree more. Now let's move on if you don't mind. But point well taken as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think you all understand that my position on the conflict of interest policy is deep, long-standing, and not worth falling on my sword over. So why don't we move on to the remaining portions of our agenda? And I yield, I never know which of you guys to yield to, and Mark left the room for a minute. So Bobby Joe. would you-
Sometimes we don't even know what to yield to. So I'll skip to the Blue Cross contract update because that's a quick one. So that one was completed. We are in a contract with Blue Cross. I think the only piece that was outstanding was we were trying to nail down some specifics with regarding pharmacy programs and reporting. But other than that, the Blue Cross contract is in effect. As far as the Visitors renewal, and I'll let Mark speak to this as well. We did finalize the renewal for Visitors. It was a little bit complicated this year because of the high hospital budgets that were not included in the rates when we initially filed them in June. It was something that we had highlighted to Visitors that would likely change. So we did have some back and forth with them, which we did resolve. And we have some plans in the works to avoid that confusion and back and forth in the future for the calendar year 24 renewal, which will start sooner than we want. Anything else on that, Mark, as far as the Visitors renewal?
No, I think you captured it. You're right. It was more complex than normal, chiefly because of the hospital budgets. It was a calendar year filing, so everything had to be done sooner than it had been in the past. We didn't have the hospital budgets when we had to file. We had then to go back and relook at them again. Long story short, we got through it all. It just was more of a slog than it has been in recent years, but that is settled. And I think as Bobby Joe said, I was coming in the room, the Visitors contract has been done as of today. We finally got final approval from
I
them.
actually hadn't talked about that yet, Mark. So
Oh,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Yeah, so the Visitors contract has also been renegotiated for calendar year 23. And we did a lot of work on that over the last couple of weeks and just got notification from Visitors today that the final language revisions had been approved by them and we're comfortable with them as well. So Joe, you'll be getting that to sign in due course.
What you said, calendar 23, you meant calendar 23?
Yeah, for the contract, yes.
It's been a very condensed timeline.
I just wasn't quite sure. Okay, good. Then what is it? What motion would you like us to consider?
I don't think
Don't think
have
we
any
need one.
motions
Got it.
with regard to that. We do have.
Well, it's just an update. I see. You're right.
Yes, and we do have another update Mark is going to talk about with regard to a travel rider that Blue Cross has just created. I'll go ahead, Mark, I'll let you talk about that and I can show it.
There's a memorandum and a travel rider flyer from Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont that was in your packet. I hope both were self-explanatory. In the wake of the Dobbs decision by the United States Supreme Court, Blue Cross approached us and said, we're willing to offer a travel rider to all of our clients. It is like any other benefit, in this case, subject to cost sharing. And it is a $2,500 travel rider, as you can see here, to assist people who need it to get surgical or medication-assisted voluntary termination of pregnancy, non-surgical treatments as components of gender-affirming services for trans and gender-diverse people, or surgical treatments as components of gender-affirming services for trans and gender-diverse people. We talked about it with Blue Cross. We had conversations here as the management staff, and we considered all these things to be essential health benefits and could see no reason why we would not endorse it with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont. And again, it is subject to cost sharing. And I think I'll leave it at that. We
Good.
just recommend your adoption of it.
Great. Tracy, before you go, I just want to point out that as far as I can tell, a travel rider is merely a passenger, but we'll move on. Nobody, bada boom, never mind. Tracy?
Well, first, I want to thank the management team and Blue Cross Blue Shield for bringing this forward. I am, I'm very proud to be able to be a part of taking steps to take care of people in respectful ways. I just have one question, and that is how this might interface with people who have HRAs and HSAs and that piece of their overall benefit package.
As I understand it, and Bobby, Joe, and John, please correct me if I'm wrong, this is going to apply to an HRA or an HSA or an out-of-pocket liability as any other service would.
That sounds right to me.
Yes, it'll go through as a claim and will transfer over to the HSA and HRA.
Good. Well, bravo to everybody involved in this one. So any further thoughts, Mike?
I just want to understand, this is, this is probably not going to apply to people in Vermont. So this is spouses and families that are residing outside of Vermont. That's the target for this.
Probably dependents.
Dependents, yeah, sorry. Yeah,
It's probably
College
mostly going to be
students or-
dependents.
thank you.
Yeah, the impact is probably fairly small.
Okay. Anything else, folks? All right. Thank you for that. Is that the Blue Cross Blue Shield contract update?
The flyer that Bobby Joe has on the screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Oh, no,
Oh,
that's,
no. I saw the contract update initially was just what I mentioned earlier. This, I think we didn't feel comfortable adding a benefit without the board's permission. So we did want to bring this for a vote. Correct,
So
Mark?
we need a motion to move it.
on the travel rider?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
All right. Well,
So moved.
I
Lisa-
second.
Lisa seconds. Anything else? Anything further? All in favor, please raise your hand. We got them all this time. Thank you all very much, and thanks for bringing it to our attention. So now, is there a BCBS contract update that is a separate issue, or am I misunderstanding?
No, that's what I mentioned at the beginning, that the contract was signed and we had some,
Oh.
it took a little bit, we had some questions
That's the
regarding
update.
pharmacy benefit, but that was it.
Okay, so we've actually done this.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, the last portion of our agenda is to continue the discussion of reference-based pricing for hospital services. I'm trying to come up with the classic, something other than Montana initiative, because I know it's broader than Montana and.
Yeah, so Montana Initiative was really kind of
Where-
the buzz name, that got this started, and we will start referencing it as reference-based pricing moving forward. But since it was a continuation of a former discussion, we wanted to just keep the.
So my understanding about today's meeting is that in light of Mark's having presented to the board sort of preliminary information based on research that at that point, I guess, was limited to Montana, you and John are here today to continue that discussion from your perspective. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. You guys have it. Go for it.
Sure. So I will go ahead and start. Just Bobby, Joe, and Mark and I have talked about this. Mark brought the idea to us a number of months ago, and we're always in favor of trying to find ways to reduce costs and improve services. And so this is something he brought to us, much like the remedy plan we have for pharmacy, which is actually saving lots of dollars and works really well. And so when Mark talked to us about what happened in Montana and wanting to bring in Maryland and try and replicate that here in Vermont, we did a little bit of research ourselves. And it seems like what we can find is the Montana initiative was really a perfect storm. It's where a lot of rural hospitals had one major client, which was the state health fund, and that state health fund was in serious financial difficulty. And so the deal was either take reference-based pricing and go with us on this, or you're going to go bankrupt just like we are. So they really had them over a barrel. It had to happen. It worked well. It saved millions of dollars, but it never translated outside of Montana. They tried it in Colorado. They tried it in North Carolina. They've tried it other places. It hasn't been replicated. And Bobby Joe and I seem to think a lot of it has to do from what we've read is geography. Montana is huge, low population, a lot of vast spaces between hospitals, unlike Vermont, where your number one hospital system is UVM, but your number two isn't even in the state. It's in New Hampshire, it's Dartmouth. It's a different situation where it doesn't necessarily work to apply itself very well here. If we had seen it happening in, pick a place, New York, Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, somewhere smaller in New England where it could be replicated, but it really hasn't been. And I know Mark's done some other research where parts of the plan have been picked up and worked. I think Oregon was one that he sent us, but in Oregon, again, it was the rural parts of the state. They left out the larger hospitals. So not that we're opposed to researching reference-based pricing, but and Mark and Bobby Joe and I had a good conversation today about what Mark really wanted out of this. And we aren't ready to commit to hiring, Maryland to come into Vermont and sit down and try and start negotiating with hospitals. Mark said he's really not looking for any kind of money or expenditure right now. He just wants to be able to continue researching reference-based pricing. And I don't think we have a problem with that. If that's something that Mark wants to look at on his own and talk to Bobby Joe and I about, I think that's fine. I'm afraid that, jumping into it too quickly. We met with Andrew Garland from Blue Cross, asked him about what would happen if we sat down with UVM and said, look, we want to negotiate directly with the hospitals. Andrew said it would precipitate a contract crisis. They'd probably terminate the contract. It would look a lot like United Healthcare about 6 months ago when we went through that issue. So that's just a brief update overview from Bobby Joe and my perspective that if we're going to put a lot of effort into something, we want to make sure that at the end of the day, that it's really going to work and succeed. And so maybe there's more work to be done on it, but we're not ready to jump in with money and 2 feet and spend a lot of time and money on it. And Bobby Joe, I know you had some things that you wanted to add as well.
Yeah.
Bobby Joe, before you do, the summary statement is you were under the impression, I guess, I'm inferring that what Mark was presenting was basically for like immediate action to advance the notion of reference-based pricing here in Vermont. And what he has said to you today, I guess, if not otherwise, that's really not where we're not that far.
Yeah,
He wants to continue doing some research about it.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say, Mark, before, I mean, you had us meeting with Doug Hoffer, you talked with Marilyn, you talked about maybe bringing in some consultants and spending some money, and Bobby Joe and I just weren't there yet. And then we talked about that today, and you said you weren't there yet either.
Okay, good. Bobby Joe.
Sure. So, the things that, when this initially got brought up in the spring, I think Lisa had teed up some questions for Mark about it out of his report. And some of the things that we had recently talked about were, just in my opinion, Blue Cross is coming in now they're down to 175,000 members, but, Blue Cross bargains with UVM. And, we've heard whether it's Blue Cross or whether it's Mark say, they don't have a lot of bargaining power with 175,000 members. So it's hard to believe that a group of 34,000 or 35,000 members is going to have any bargaining power. That's hard for me to believe. It would be great if we could knock on UVM's door and ask them to reduce their costs for us. But they did just come to the Green Mountain Care Board with a 20% rate increase request. They received 14.77 in increases. So I just have a hard time making that leap from they are asking for a 20% increase to they're going to bargain with a small, in relative terms, a small group of 35,000 people to try to come up with a better rate. And I think, when you look at reference-based pricing, whether you're looking at the Blue Cross master, a master list or charge master, I think it's called, which is basically, here's a list of all the services, here's a list of what they charge, and here's what Blue Cross will pay for it. when you switch that over to reference-based pricing, at the end of the day, they're going to still need that dollar amount. And whether they do it by charging 300% of Medicare, or whether they do it by looking at what Blue Cross's, allowed amount is, they still need to get to that dollar amount. When we talked to Mark earlier, he had talked about trying to figure out what is that dollar amount? How do we know? And so that's the type of work that he wants to research. In my position, I'm the program manager. I don't have a lot of free time to do these type of big research projects. I know that Mark also does a lot of this outside of his Vermont NEA hours or VEHI hours that are charged from Vermont NEA. But I don't have that time in my personal life to be able to devote to this type of a research project, which is why
You need to talk to your boss about that.
yeah. Well, and I know Mark has plenty on his plate. I take that away from him, and I know he does a lot of research on his own time. I got I had a lot of other things going on too.
Bobby Joe, the point well taken. That's fine. Thank you.
So I'm not sure how much time and resources we want to invest in something that we kind of see as there's not a lot of fruit. It's better from my perspective. Let's go for the low hanging fruit. Let's go for, getting people to take their medication on time, getting people in for their primary care visits. There's things that we can do to really target folks to use their healthcare wisely, whether we have a new physical therapy option coming soon that we'll be talking to you about. Making sure people take their medications on time. I mean, those are the low hanging fruit that I'd like to see us go for. I kind of feel like this is that tippity top on the top of the tree that I don't know as high as we climb if we'll ever quite reach that. But.
And then just to wrap up too, I mean, they called it the Montana Miracle, and I don't know if you can tie it together, but now after COVID, a lot of the hospitals in Montana are losing millions of dollars and are teetering on bankruptcy. A lot of it is because they spent money on traveling nurses and it just blew through their budgets, and they didn't have the surplus to cover it. And part of the reason they didn't have the surplus is probably because they were taking less with reference-based pricing. So they weren't there. They just didn't have the money to be there when the bad thing happened.
I'll bet there are other explanations for that one, but that's
There could be, but Montana's hospitals, you just Google it, they're in serious trouble.
okay. Are there any comments or questions anybody has for now about this? I imagine we will hear somewhere down the road back from all three of you about this and see what comes of it. Tracy.
I appreciate attention to constantly looking for cost-saving measures, especially given what we felt we needed to do in terms of rate setting. Before COVID, just like with dental, we were also beginning to turn back into looking at the value of the new plans that we were offering. We were just getting to the point where we were thinking we had enough data to start thinking about plan value. So, as we're thinking broadly about cost saving measures, I just wanted to put in a plug to maybe turn back into that work and look at the value and the efficacy of our current plans, particularly in the context of the HRAs and HSAs as they've been bargained and kind of have settled in. I believe those pieces are very different from the assumptions that went into the original plan design. And I was struck when Peggy said we were all encouraged to go to the CDHP Gold plan, which may be the wisest thing for most people to do, but our plan designs were intended to provide plans that were of value to different people with different circumstances. And if that's not the case, I'm curious about what we will do about that. in terms of the plans we offer or the structure of the individual plans. So anyway, I'm just asking to get that back on the radar as part of our look at cost savings and plan design, and maybe get a sense of the value of the 4 plans and how we're doing now that we're several years into that and probably fairly settled into the post-COVID realities of life. And maybe it's possible to do that reflection at this point.
Looking around the room, I guess it was just Mark and I who, with Tracy, participated in the development discussions of the current plans. Some of us thought there were too many plans being offered. Some of us thought there weren't enough, and people make their own decisions. So, and there's probably a lot of room for modification of our plans, and probably is a subject that we ought to be spending some quality time on. Okay, well.
Well, I just want to jump in and say, boy, I really support that. I think getting some data collection or using whatever is available and really doing an examination of the use of the plans and taking a look at, is there something better that could be changed? It would be more cost effective for us. And by us, I mean the school boards and the 20% share of all the subscribers. So I think that would be a fabulous place to put our energies as a group.
Well said. Spoken like somebody who knows. Yeah, I'm just sitting here. Mike, you actually had your hand raised.
Yeah,
He's been
thank
sitting
you.
there quiet the whole time. All right.
So I'm wondering what the next steps are. So I just want to be clear. So Jonathan, you said you're good with Mark continuing his investigation with no expenditure.
Right, Bobby, Joe, and Mark talked about that today, and if he wants to continue looking into it, and see where pieces of it are successful, and bring that back and share that with Bobby, Joe, and me, so we can discuss it. I think that's great. I think it's just important that the 3 of us are in agreement before we bring any proposal to the board.
That's fine. It's a more general statement of that. I'm not sure that the board should be restricted from hearing proposals unless the 3 of you happen to be in sync with one another in all respects. But I get the idea as a general rule.
I think it generally works better if we're.
It absolutely does. Absolutely does. You know, if people come up with pre-negotiated compromises, it sort of narrows what we as a board will feel free to try to do to it. Mike.
Yeah, I like the idea. I mean, that the 3 of you are coming to us together. You don't have to agree, right? But I would encourage you all to have discussions and say, okay, this is how we're going to bring it to the board. Maybe one position. I like the idea of hearing different viewpoints, but I think I like the idea of you guys working together and bringing proposals forward.
Good. Thank you for that. I think seems pretty general. All right. Well,
and I think we do try to get there. You know, I think 3 of us try to get there. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't.
we're all in groups like that. That's more power to us all. All right. Well, it's a little early, but I happen to know my grandchild is about to come through the door to my left and to your right. And so unless there's something else on your minds, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Sorry, point of order.
Yes, sir.
One item left is we're supposed to set a date for our next meeting.
Good luck. That's going to take.
Just a friendly reminder that the annual meeting.
I'm sorry, Bobby Joe, you were probably about to say what I was going to suggest. But
I just wanted to say that the reminder that the annual meeting is Friday at 8:15.
At Lake Maury, beautiful
Right.
Lake Maury.
right.
And if you would like,
Virtual Lake Maury.
Right. Bobby
I
Joe,
can send out a link for anybody that wants to attend virtually.
which of you will be there? John, okay. And Tracy. Well, I'm the chair of this outfit and I'm not going to be there, but I can certainly be hooked up. Is there going to be a Zoom
Yes,
possibility?
I'll send you all the link right away.
So-
as a practical matter, I'll probably open the meeting and somebody will have to make a motion to dispense with the reading of the minutes and such, and then we'll be, somebody's going to ask questions about the rates. Whatever's asked, I'll defer to you guys. Right? And then they'll be done in 15 minutes and everybody will be frustrated.
Yes,
Just like every year.
Right?
Yeah, so can I just
right?
ask, I think I only attended once or twice, but I probably was like hungover. When,
Only way to attend
That's
those.
too,
oh, is this
that's
being
definitely-
recorded? Is this being
Definitely too
recorded?
much information
Um,
for the public. Yeah.
So is there a book of, is there an agenda and there's business, or it's pretty pro forma?
Both. It's a pro forma agenda, which Bobby Joe will, I think it's already out.
I think so too.
Yeah,
There's
I'll give
nothing to vote on.
there's no
Nothing to
longer
vote on.
anything for the
And
members.
nothing to vote on unless, I'm sorry, nothing to vote on unless there's a motion from the floor.
Okay.
The way it's been explained to me, because I have not been there, is the only people who attend are people looking for coffee and wander into the wrong room.
Which in a nutshell explains why I'm really not anxious to spend 2 hours driving and 2 hours driving for the 15 minutes responding to the question, you're in the wrong room, right? Okay. All right. I mean, it's easy to make fun. You know, people are at the conference and they're not there particularly for this group. Anything else? Yeah, that's the kid. All right, going once, going twice. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks again. We'll see you.
Bye.